Welcome to Killer POV. I'm joined. I'm Elric Kane.
Who are you?
I'm Elric Kane.
Hi, Elric.
Hi, and I am joined by Fangoria's Rebekah McKendry.
How's it going?
It's been better intros
Aww.
than that. And no, it's going to get good. And I'm also joined by Rob Galluzzo from FEARnet and Icons of Fright.
Welcome.
And we also have secretly, silently waiting in the wings, Mr. Mike Mendez.
He's not allowed to talk yet.
He's not part of things, but he will be listening.
We've got him in the
and
corner.
judging.
We're poking him with sticks at the moment.
Yeah, you have to wait till we introduce you, pal. Officially. That wasn't an official introduction.
I just want you at home to know that he is sitting here listening to this. The same thing as you are.
Coming up.
This is live. Kind of. Okay, so let's kind of talk around the room what we have seen this week.
Yeah. Well, since you're both looking at me, I'll start. So I saw the 16 millimeter screening of Frightmare, which was awesome.
Where?
That was at Jump Cut Cafe in Studio City.
What's the website?
I have no fucking clue.
Shameless.
I don't even know.
Shameless.
But that was really cool because I haven't seen Frightmare in a really long time, and so I was totally psyched to see that.
I'd never seen it.
Really? I'd seen it a long time ago when I was a kid. I actually still have like the big box VHS.
Oh, yeah,
I brought it to show off because
the film was it was very slow, and I love slow burn, but I was won over by the end. Everyone kept saying the last 5 minutes will win you over, and it did. But if it hadn't, I would have been it's kind of like a less exciting Motel Hell. Pete Walker in general. Mick Garris came into Jump Cut the other day, and I told him, he goes, "What was the film?" I didn't, he was wondering, and I said, "Oh, it was Pete Walker's Frightmare." And he goes, "Pete Walker," and he pulled the sourest face I have ever seen. He just obviously hates his film. So
what's weird for me is Frightmare. It's not like a real, and we can get into this later when we're discussing genre. Frightmare. Rob's already growling at me.
We'll get to that.
Frightmare is very much. It's like a romance film for me. Where I could perceive it as like a cannibal horror film, but it's much more like a Moore, where it's like an old man helping out his demented wife. It's just so sweet.
Yeah, you don't see much gore.
Yeah,
they do put that aside, so maybe you don't judge the characters as much. It's hard to know, but it was a good film. It was a fun surprise. I mean, I'll see anything I haven't seen before. That was fun.
All right,
you were sleeping.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen the movie. I would have loved to, but I miscalculated my nap and I slept through that screening.
My 2-year-old does that all the time, so you're in good company.
Yeah, but you know what? I will mention one of the movies that I saw recently, which was also at the Jump Cut, hosted by Rebekah, Inhuman Resources.
Yeah,
the Fangoria film. Yeah, which is called Red Ink.
It's Red Ink in Australia, and we did the U.S. releases in Human Resources.
All right. I thought it was a pretty solid movie. I'm not crazy about either title, to be honest.
Me neither.
I prefer Red Ink, even though in Human Resources is cleverer. I don't want to say that out loud. I don't want to watch that.
Prefer Human Resources. Yeah.
Red Ink, it just sounds kind of interesting. I don't know what it means exactly.
Right. Well, is it out yet from Fangoria?
It actually is. It's already on VOD, and it will be available for rental next week. And then we actually go to Target like in the first week of March.
What's it about?
Well, to me, I liked it because I didn't know anything about it, but the best description I can give is it's Severance meets Saw.
That's a great description.
It's got that dark humor that Severance had, and obviously the whole office setting, and then it had kind of a little mean streak with a lot of these like torture sequences, if you will, which are really good. And it also has Danielle Harris's Australian
counterpart. Is that not crazy?
It was pretty interesting. I'd love to know if the director, that was a calculated decision.
I hope those two play sisters together in something at some point.
She was good though.
Yeah, she was good. And the killer was kind of a cool, he made like a cool new killer.
Yeah, he did.
If they were to franchise it, which anything's possible these days, I could see him being kind of like one of those iconic kind of. Movie killers, if you will. Yeah, and I don't know his name, but he was in that
Nicholas
movie.
Hope. Nicholas Hope, if you grow up in Australasia and maybe some other places, Bad Boy Bubby is one of the greatest cult films ever made. And it's he has an amazing performance as a 40-something who's never left his home. And his mother has told him there's been some sort of apocalypse outside. So she tells him, "You can never go outside, Bubby. Only I can go out with a gas mask." And, she sleeps with him. They have sex. And there's some crazy things that happen in this film. But eventually he gets out.
The fucking cat.
Yeah, he wants to put Glad wrap over Cat's mouth. But he's such an unhinged original performance. That's why it was a memorable film. And so people should look for that if they can. I know it's on DVD in America. It's just harder to track down.
It's on Netflix. Dave and I watched it on Netflix.
So it's impossible to find in America. unless you use Netflix.
That's not
Unless
true
you
at
have the
all.
internet.
Actually, at Amoeba, when I ran the cult section there, we'd always have that. That was a very popular title.
Yeah,
so.
no, I remember seeing it there.
Yeah.
It is really fun. And I like this film. I thought it was much more successful with the comedy gore parts than it was in the tense horror stuff. I felt like the parts where we're referencing Saw were just kind of, because Saw's already done it. So it's already kind of dull. But the humor and gore was really won me over. I noticed that in the audience. It won them over at about the 20-minute mark.
Yeah. I love the 5 strikes and you're out kind of thing. Like the lead character, like kind of anytime somebody in the quote-unquote office, fucks up, he'll put a slash across their forehead. And when they get to 5, it's kind of when he offs them.
I'm glad you guys liked this. This was one that I first watched 2 years ago. I was invited to a private screening because they knew that we were acquiring new films for Fango. And the screening was at 8 a.m. in like some stuffy screening room on Wilshire Boulevard. And it was me and then like 6 70-year-old men with suits. And, and they just all kept saying like, are you okay for this gore? This is a gory film. And at the end, every single one of them was like, I don't know if it's franchisable. I don't know if I like it. Is this like Hostel? Did you like this? And I thought it was phenomenal. So, yeah, I'm glad that we ended up getting it for Fangoria.
Right on.
Are they mostly foreign films that you guys are picking up?
A lot of them are, yeah. A lot of them are. Axed is currently in Target right now, and that's a foreign one. But yeah, I think that Fango, that's one of the things that we really try to push is that, we have good films that come out in the U.S., but a lot of times good films come out other places in the world and they just never make it overseas because a lot of times people just don't watch them here. So we really try to push them out.
I saw a couple of sequels. I'm not two.
Did you see Haunting in Connecticut, Ghosts of Georgia?
I have not seen that film. Even though
we're gonna take your word for it.
Damn it, people! Somebody see that film.
Yeah, during our first show, we all lost a lot of faith in Rebekah for liking that film. But then on Twitter,
I'm telling you, it's not horrible.
But then on Twitter, I read that Ty West said I'm having an out of body experience watching that film because he was meant to direct it right up until the end. I didn't know that at the time. So So that's interesting. Yeah. The first sequel we saw, I'm not going to talk about much, but I will say we'll probably talk about it next month more, which is Birdemic 2, which we had a very secret screening of. And the first 40 minutes were incredibly funny.
Yes.
And then it is more like the first one.
Yeah, it gets, once they actually get into the plot part, it kind of lost it for me
It's like, have you seen it? But the first 40 minutes are on parallel with The Room for that kind of, how is this cinema... Yeah, we're going to talk about what is a horror film today, but what is cinema and how does this exist? How can cinema grammar be that off? If every shot is a beat off or a second too long or unnecessary, it was pretty interesting.
My husband, when we left, he said, well, there was no skill, but there was passion. Yeah. And that's what happens when you have passion with no skill.
Yeah. And delusion.
I mean,
when you really think you are the master of the romantic thriller, as he does, that's what you get. But I'm going to save that one for a little later because we will probably end up having the producer on here to talk about that. And he has good stories.
He does. He has amazing stories.
Working with James. It's a pretty funny film. But something that I am not the biggest found footage fan. I have kind of railed on it a lot. I have been to the top of the mountain now. And I've seen something that I actually came down thinking was actually kind of fantastic. And that is S-VHS. It
VHS 2 now.
Yes, VHS. Oh, they changed it.
They changed it to VHS 2.
Oh.
Because I don't think that most of the populace knows what S-VHS is. It's kind of like an insider term.
You know what I say to the rest of the population? Go fuck yourself. I mean, the whole point.
If you don't know what a Betacam is, you can suck it.
I mean, there's a lot of words that have been used for titles that we don't. I'm bummed to hear that. But anyway, VHS 2. It's what's cool about it is it's not as lo-fi as the original. I found the lo-fi quality actually added to the kind of creepiness of the first one. So I don't think the sequel is anywhere near as creepy or unsettling, but what it is a whole shitload more entertaining. It is like really like they've picked great directors, people like Eduardo Sanchez, Jason Eisner, and the one that just absolutely, and everyone's saying it, so it's not original, Gareth Evans from The Raid and Timo Tjahjanto make this film in the middle. That's about 25 minutes, and I'd say it might be one of the best horror films I've seen in the last few years, that 20 minutes, and I would love to see it as a full feature. It was just everything I look for in horror. It was kind of like a great version of Cannibal Holocaust, but nothing to do with that, just the way they kind of approach a documentary crew. I'm not going to go into any spoilers on the individual stories, but they're all some of them are very comic, so that's one of the big shifts, I think, from the first film, but they are shot on a much much more high def and what's Adam Wingard's, which is maybe one of the weaker ones. Actually, the concept of his one could be a feature film, and I think maybe that's why it's the weakest of the shorts, is because it's a bigger idea kind of stuffed in at the start. But really fun. It's a really fun movie, and I really hope people go see it who didn't see the first, because I think they're going to have a good surprise. I think you guys are seeing it pretty soon, right? You said...
I don't know about that for sure.
Or somebody said...
But I enjoyed the first one. To me, the best. I mean, I thought the last segment with Radio Silence was by far the best.
See, I love the first one
and the scariest. And I like the first one
too.
I
love the Bruckners. I thought it was.
But how does this one compare? Because you just said that it's not as scary.
I would say only Gareth Evans and Timo's works on a kind of a scare level. The others, it feels more like a classic anthology. The first one, in a weird way, even though they made it like an anthology, all the films kind of bleed together. Because of I think probably the aesthetic and the kind of misogynistic tone, which is just undeniable in that one. It's like all these men, hey, write whatever you want, and they all came back with a story about men abusing women
completely
in some way, and a woman getting revenge. This one hasn't got that at all. I mean, literally, there is aliens, there is zombies, there is. I mean,
that's good.
It has everything, and I don't want to get into spoilers, but it's a lot of fun. And so I feel like it's maybe more like a creep show or something. They still have a framing story. The framing story doesn't feel as necessarily integrated this time, even though it's probably better made. But so it sounds like I'm saying it's not as good. It's just not as creepy as the original. But I think it's a much more entertaining film. I think it could do really well. I thought it makes me really excited about the future of for Gareth Evans and Timo, because Timo's ABCs of Death was one of the most disturbing and strange shorts I've ever seen.
It was one of the ones that stuck with me. Like
bizarre.
I can't remember most of them, but I loved that one.
So the masturbating to death.
I still haven't seen ABCs, but I might catch it this weekend.
There's enough little gems to make it worth your while, but it can be a tough view. But and Gareth Evans, after The Raid, it's one of the most kind of electric films. I remember just going to The Raid in the first 20 minutes going, oh, why is everyone talking about this movie? This is every Indonesian action film I've ever seen. And then suddenly you're like, oh, I've never seen.
Also, I don't understand why that one, we'll get into this later, but I don't understand why that one's covered by horror sites.
Yeah, are they? I know it was covered by Badass.
Everyone, like, every single one of them was
I'd agree completely on this one.
in production, and I'm like,
it's an action.
Why would horror sites cover that?
I think we just reviewed the first one, but I don't think we've done anything with the second.
Okay. No, I would agree with you on that one. I don't know where that, but we'll get into that.
We'll get to that
comment before.
I also I wanted to bring this up because you were the motivation, Elric, for me visiting these films. But I was on a Larry Cohen kick
one of my
last week, so I saw all 3 It's Alive movies.
Wow,
and The Stuff.
That's kind of a feat.
Oh, yeah. One of my favorite.
Yeah, and honestly, I just realized I'd only seen the first It's Alive, and it was years ago. And I wasn't that big a fan of it. I mean, I get why it is what it is, but I was kind of blown away by the sequels.
Really? Don't they go to an island?
Island.
I was gonna say, the trailer used to scare the shit out of me when I was a kid, because it was just this like rotating crib, and then it had this claw.
Their campaigns were beautiful.
Yeah.
That was the first one. The trailer for the second is like the birthday party and the cake. But
forget the island, they go to a courtroom. That's a great scene.
I twittered that I was watching it, and
I was so excited.
Elric replied back, he's like, wait till the courtroom scene. It's
so
outrageous.
Amazing. It really is. That is the definition of outrageous, is a courtroom scene with the look.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I actually thought the second one was a really solid little horror movie. The third one's just so batshit crazy that you can't not love it.
Yeah, it's pretty
wild. Like you said, the courtroom thing, somebody tweeted back at me saying, just wait till they get to Cuba. Yeah. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean?
Oh my God, I've never seen the third one.
Amazing.
It's fun, but for me, it doesn't work as a film as well. I mean, I love the first one. I think the first one is like classic horror, but I agree with you. It's not as fun, but I think it gets to the dread and tension of like a male's vision of what you're about to go through, of childbirth.
I know.
Because you don't get to see, you don't get to feel a lot of the stuff, you don't get to experience the way the woman does. And so he's in another room, and then suddenly everyone's just been killed and you don't see the baby.
And I got to say right now, as I said, claw, the kid has a foot wedged into my left rib right now. And that's all I was picturing was like this claw over my rib
Her baby's going to be mini Larry Cohen.
Oh, God.
Hey, let's make a movie. Cue the winged serpent. Nah.
But yeah, you know what? I think the first one, I saw it at a time, you know, I'd already seen like Basket Case and Dead Alive, and like, you know, anything with a killer kid in it I'd already seen.
Right, so
I saw It's Alive when I was way older, not at an impressionable age, so it never really stuck with me, but the sequels were crazy. I mean, part 2 stands on its own. I love I think I was telling you the first 5 or 10 minutes is just like some random couple's like baby shower.
That's right.
And then the lead character from part 1 is just sitting in the corner. He doesn't leave. And they're like, who's that? Did you invite him? And they're like, no, who is this weird guy? So it was really creepy right off the bat because you're like, oh, I know who that is and what he just went through in the first one. But
He's crashing baby showers.
yeah, but I mean, and then of course he's like, there's something wrong with your baby. And you're like, whoa, like that's how you kick off a movie or a sequel. You know, so
that's
really,
what sequels can do, better than originals when they really take it. That's great. What did you think of one of my all-time favorite films, This Stuff?
Oh, I loved it. I mean, because Michael Moriarty's in It's Alive 3, and he's just
and Q. He's amazing. Q, one of the great film performances ever. What's the story about?
I don't think he actually has lines in that. I mean, it's like everything is improv.
Now, there's a great story about Q. Somebody just told me this, Kevin. I thought it might have been one of you. Stop me if it was one of you. Dina De Laurentiis is outside of the theater when Q first premieres, and somebody, a major investor, somebody walks out and goes, oh my God, that's like 90% Drek with a great performance stuck in the middle. And Dino just said, I'm responsible for the Drek.
I think that was a Dave story because he's interviewed him before.
It's like, to me, that's perfect. It's just like, but Michael Murray, it really is. He gives this very unhinged, strange, performance in that film. That's just such a B movie.
Yeah. Plus, Karen Black is his ex-wife in 3? Yeah, Karen Black is his ex-wife in part 3.
That's right, on the roof. Giving the
oh my God.
Star-studded. Yeah. It's Alive 3.
They sent him to an island, and then like 5 years later, like, let's see what they're like now. So it's pretty great.
I'm waiting for It's Alive cellular, It's Alive phone booth, It's Alive, just all the crossovers. Later, Larry, not as good. But great writer. I mean, one of the best genre writers. Just his humor and sense of vision was
Maniac Cop movies.
Yeah, exactly. Some great stuff.
Uncle Sam.
Did he do Uncle Sam?
He wrote Uncle Sam.
Oh my gosh.
For his buddy Billy.
I can't defend that one.
No, neither can I.
Well, I have one more thing. Oh, well, besides from the following, which did anybody else watch this week's episode?
I did.
You did? Did you like it? Is it holding strong for you?
No, it's too contrived now.
Okay.
What
it was better than the last two, though. It was more.
I think they're on like episode 6 now.
I haven't seen any of them yet. I'm way behind.
Yeah.
It was better than the last couple. I thought it was a bit of a return.
Yeah. See,
because Kevin Bacon was in it more.
It dipped for me, and now I'm back. Like, oh God, what the hell's going to happen? So I'm back with it. So that's my following thing. But since I get like majorly turned on by hard to find horror movies, the one that I checked out this week. Sorry. Sorry, I will reword that. Since I get majorly excited about hard to find horror movies, the one that I saw this week is called Leptirica, which is from 1973. It's a Yugoslavian made-for-TV movie that was never released in the U.S. It is called The She Butterfly.
Getting me hot. Keep going. Keep coming. Leptirica.
But it's absolutely awesome. It's the whole concept that when you die, a butterfly will come from your body and it holds your soul. And so when you kill a vampire, you have to kill the butterfly along with it. And if you don't, the butterfly can then go infect somebody else.
Is this Mothman prophecies?
Not quite.
Oh, okay.
No.
That's the inverse.
Mothra.
Okay.
But it's just a really cool film. Yugoslavian, it's a weird kind of combo of horror and comedy, and the comedy's very body. And so
I got burned out on Yugoslavian cinema, so I was just taking a break. It's like, you get
especially made for TV. I mean,
it's just
there's
one after the
so
other.
much going on there.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's just you probably haven't seen it, but you should.
Where did you even hear this movie?
I've been researching for a book that I'm working on, and it's just things that were never released in the U.S. And this one was actually recommended to me by a fan who lives in Britain and was like, have you ever seen Leptirica? And I was, no, not at all. I've never even heard of it. So I ended up having to pay way too much to get an illegal copy off the internet. And it's really quite good.
Okay.
So I have
Quite good.
Quite
Is
good.
that enough for you to go out and watch a film if somebody says it's quite good?
Well,
What do you think?
I don't know if it's. I don't know if I'd give it my fucking awesome vote, but it's
Quite good.
Quite good.
Quite good. Quite good. I guess if you're bored, quite good would do it. It'd push you over the edge.
You know what I'd compare it to that I know you've seen? Valerie and her
Week of Wonders.
Week of Wonders.
Love that film.
I would compare it to that.
Love that film.
Yeah.
That film is one of the strangest. And again, this would go in well with our debate. It's like it uses horror elements, like visual elements, without being a horror film at all.
I think mostly
Which
it's
is kinda
about Valerie coming to puberty.
Yeah, it's a coming of age, but you
it's got
see
some
vampire
vampires in
faces,
there too.
but they're not, they're not scary vampires. So you start going, is this a horror film, or is it just borrowing horror, fantasy, visual elements to tell a coming of age story? So there are,
Have you seen Valerie and her Week of Wonders?
No,
Rob?
I haven't. No.
You probably dig it visually. It's
okay.
check new wave, and
it's weird.
Yeah, it's go watch the Trailers from Hell. Do a good Trailers from Hell on it. It's fun. I think Joe Dante does it.
Right on.
It's cool. That's enough blathering from us.
Yeah,
We're done blathering.
This whole time we've been being judged. He's been eyeing us up and down. He's had stuff to say, but he hasn't said it. He held back.
Yeah.
So we're going to quickly give you 1 minute to just say anything you want about anything that just went down.
Yes.
And then we'll move into
Jesus Christ, this is the most
Mike
fucking
Mendez,
difficult
ladies and
15
gentlemen.
minutes here. I'm like, do you know how hard it is to keep my mouth shut, period? And let alone when you're talking about Birdemic 2 and Larry Cohen movies. I'm like, oh, fuck you guys. I'll just sit in the corner here. I'll just I'll check my Twitter.
we're getting the countdown, and that seems like it's a wrap on our show. Thank you, Mike Mendez, for joining us. We'll see you next week.
I was mainly fascinated by Justin, our producer, if you will, who would just like leave, and kind of like go get a sandwich, and then and I'm like, I should go with Justin because they're in their own conversation. Like I'm like, I want to know more about Birdemic 2. I mean, that cruel tease of like oh, it's kind of self-aware but not really. I'm like,
what's a great line? What's the best line? There's a couple lines we'll just give you.
It was the one. It's just they're at this museum, and all of a sudden he says like, I wish Susan was here, but too bad that she died on that fish that my dad cooked her. No fucking clue where that came from. No context. But we don't even know who Susan is.
I love Birdemic for many lines like that, such as "I need to go. I think I hear a mountain lion."
Oh yeah. There's a line in this one where somebody walks in. It's all about Hollywood. So this is his Billy Wilder movie.
Right.
This is his Sunset Boulevard. And there's a part where he says to his friend, "I just need $1 million," and his friend just looks at him and goes, "Oh, well, why don't I just open your script right now? Here's $100,000," and just hands it to high five.
There's excessive high fiving.
A lot
in
of
this.
high five.
No, I mean the first one had a 3-minute applause scene around the boardroom.
This one's got about a
amazing.
10-minute walk down Hollywood Boulevard where literally they film him walking from, I'd say, probably Hollywood and Vine all the way down to about Fuller Avenue. Then he crosses down to Sunset and walks all the way back.
You've just sold me on this, by the way. I was on the fence. No, my question about it, so many questions. We went into the Island of the Alive. I mean, Jesus Christ, what are you doing to me?
Island of Birdemic.
I know. Jesus Christ. Anyway, I saw like the teaser for Birdemic 2, and it was them like eating shawarma, and what worried me was that it was self-aware, and what makes the first one so just a gem is that he doesn't know, he doesn't know that this is total shit, and he
doesn't. He still doesn't.
He still doesn't.
He doesn't. Everyone else does.
Oh, thank God. But that's still a problem. That's still that's still an issue because I mean. No one was in on the joke on the first one, and if people start becoming aware, it ceases to be funny. And when we start going like, oh, I got to make this funny, it doesn't work anymore.
You'll see is that he recast the two leads. The two leads aren't the same two leads as the previous, and so therefore they have no idea. They actually hadn't seen Birdemic.
I'm a little sad that the lead guy is not in it.
No, they're all in it,
okay.
but not the leads.
This is just a random little factoid. One of the best jobs I ever had was I would cut the videos on Beavis and Butthead. This last season that they did, which was about 2 years ago. And one of the producers I worked with, a guy named Robert Parigi, who's also a fine director, made a movie called Love Object. Exactly, very good. All right, with good company here. He was always trying to sneak in, like these weird kind of cult movies to Mike Judge. So he got him. We were successful in getting Human Centipede through. Cool. And Beavis and Butthead did a thing on Human Centipede. So one of the things that never aired was Beavis and Butthead on Birdemic. We did it. And Mike Judge was just like, what the hell are these movies you're bringing me? But he did record the jokes, and so one of my favorite thing is that the lead guy. It's the trailer, and he's just kind of walking, and it's like hey, what's wrong with this guy? And he's like, I think he's trying to win an Oscar by playing retarded.
I want to see that.
It was a gem, but it never aired.
Could they ever put it online?
I could get in trouble because I have a non-disclosure. Right. I do have a copy. I can show you, but I'll have to come to the Jump Cut and show it on my phone or something. But
do you have a website for that?
JumpCutCafe.com is going to be my just a wild guess there. So,
but I do have to say, Birdemic too. Everybody, I've seen all the blogs online, and everybody's so worried that it is so self-aware that it's no longer funny,
right?
Because it is about Hollywood, and everybody's like, oh, he's very aware, that it is a film construction now, and it is in Hollywood. But it is seriously like the idea of Hollywood that you had when you were 10.
Okay.
Where like anybody in the world can come here and you're going to make it immediately and make millions of dollars and make movies with your friends constantly. And it's just awesome.
Oh, right.
So yeah, it's very much this kind of idealized shiny, shimmery view of Hollywood that is just hilarious.
Well, you're raising my excitement for the film once again. And then I wanted to jump into Island of the Alive because, come on, that's great.
Yeah.
They're giant babies. It's a movie about giant babies.
Yeah.
That's fabulous. But then when you got to 1973 Yugoslavian TV movies, I was like, how can I keep my mouth shut on this? I mean, come
Welcome
on.
to my wheelhouse.
So, anyway, sorry, no. So, hi everyone.
Welcome.
Mike Mendez, ladies and gentlemen.
I felt like the movie The Invisible. I think it was a David Goyer movie where like everyone was talking and no one could hear him. I was like, I'm here. I want to talk. You're talking geek.
At least you're not the rapist Kevin Bacon, Invisible Hello Man.
Oh,
by
yeah.
Paul Verhoeven.
Right.
That's a lot more intense.
I thought you were
just
going
bring
on,
the whole room down.
I thought you were going on The Following again. Which, which was a very heated trivia question the other day at Trivia Night. Was Kevin Bacon Following one because who wears a pacemaker? But I don't watch the show, so
yeah,
so it's complicated.
That was for those of you who don't know, we do a horror trivia night here in LA.
Where do you do it?
Jump Cut Cafe.
www.jumpcutcafe.com.
I don't know the website. You should just get it like on beeper so that you can just press a button every single time.
This episode broke.
But one of the questions that I asked on Trivia Night was, what device does Kevin Bacon have to wear to keep him alive? And the answer, of course, is a pacemaker.
But see, I and we wrote pacemaker, but we were like, but you don't wear a pacemaker. But apparently on the show you do.
You do, which is weird because like my dad has a pacemaker and it is surgically implanted in his shoulder.
Yes.
Like you can't take it off. But on the show, like he can.
Oh, really? It's something he can take off like Iron Man?
Yeah, it's
well,
weird.
that's what I kept thinking. The thing from Iron Man. What do you call that?
Because like,
oh,
they'll
that's fiction.
touch things to it, like they'll taser it, and he'll like freak out, and then it's like, oh, see, you're weak. This is like your Achilles heel.
TV bullshit, though.
It does sound like
completely.
TV bullshit.
Yeah, because like my dad had a heart attack. He had a pacemaker. It's surgically implanted in his shoulder.
Sure.
And it's you don't even see it.
But The Following does open
around
with it. Whenever each episode opens, it says not 100% medically accurate. The Following.
Oh, does it? Okay, all right. Yeah, I was going to buy that.
How cool would that have been?
So that was one of the many controversial questions. We'll get into that later in section 3, genre talks about what makes a horror film, which I have many thoughts on because I have many thoughts on all this shit.
I have notes.
including The Raid, which I have lots of thoughts on that I will debate, even though it is not a horror movie, but I could see how it could be considered as one. So
it appears from my notes that you have made a film called Big Ass Spider.
I have. Yeah.
You needed your notes for that?
No, I didn't.
Come on, it's common knowledge.
When we saw some teaser footage, I don't know I know there is a proper trailer.
There's a trailer out there. You saw the extended little highlight reel that I'm just kind of using for press and.
Can we mention what we saw without?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
very minorly, like with.
I don't think there's any big spoilers in the thing. We know it's about a giant spider. Yeah. That we have covered.
But it was actually really is, and I said to you before that, and you told me this is not a sci-fi movie for sci-fi.
Well, here's the thing. It came to me as a script called Dino Spider, and my first reaction to it was like, oh my god, has it really come to this? And sadly it had. So
and this was being offered to you, or
this
just
was being
to read?
offered to me, well, to read, and if I could, if I was Dino Spider worthy, and then the shooting title was Mega Spider, but it's an independent film. It's done by a new company called Epic Pictures, which are great guys, and they had a really good attitude about it, but. While we were making Mega Spider, the most frustrating thing to me, was trying to, I'm going to do something with this. I'm going to try to elevate this. I'm going to try to make this cool. What was that? Without fail, everyone would go like, so when's it airing on Sci-Fi?
Yeah.
Is it for the Asylum?
Yeah.
And it was
Charles Band.
Or Charles Band, right? So UFO films are Asylum. Which is it? And the thing is, no, it's an independent film. So now look, it's about a giant spider. It may very well end up on Sci-Fi Channel. So I don't want to deride the many fine films of that era on Sci-Fi Channel.
Which ones or many? Which ones? Be specific.
Look, they acquire fine films. Okay. They show Saw.
They do.
They show the Gravedancers. They show Abominable. They show good stuff. So anyway, but yeah, no, it's a common misconception that at least at the moment it is a totally independent film. Completely independently funded.
And you fought for that title as well because it was Mega Spider for the longest time.
It was a 2-year battle. It was the first thing I said at the meeting is like, we got to try to like just so people are aware it's a different type of thing. We got to make it different. So I think it should be called Big Ass Spider. And they're like, that's funny. Yeah, no. But I wore them down and God bless them for it. The producers have been nothing but great and supportive, and which I think makes the big difference between the mega blank movies. I don't want to pick on anyone's movie in particular, because I don't want to blame it on the filmmakers necessarily. I mean, sure, sometimes the filmmakers really don't give a shit, but sometimes I think they do, and they're, up against, these 12-day schedules with like, $200,000 and fuck you, it's that long and I don't care and you're not editing it or whatever. And these guys had a very different approach and were really open and really collaborative and really supportive and allowed me. I'm just like, look, I think I can do something with this if I could just, have everyone's support and belief in it. And so they, at every point, made the right decision. And so thankfully, the final battle that was the final fight I had to go. It was the title, and so thankfully about 5 weeks ago we changed it to Big Ass Spider finally.
And you got into South by Southwest, which is huge.
We got into South by Southwest, yeah, absolutely, which is great. So I mean, cool. Already it's kind of that's what I really wanted was to not just be just a generic TV movie. So even just getting in this festival was a reward enough. That was really great to kind of really at least start it, give it a better chance than just a TV movie or something like that. So,
well, one of the things I love about what I've seen in the trailer and some of the stuff you've shown us is, if you know Mike personally, he has a wonderful sense of humor.
Completely.
He's my karaoke partner.
Yes, that's true.
And The Convent is a film that I think best represents you personally.
I love The Convent.
Oh, God bless you.
I have such a thing for nunsploitation. It's like one of my favorite subgenres.
Yes.
It's pretty great.
By the way, I just want to point that Justin left again because he, apparently, I don't know.
If you can no longer hear us.
Exactly.
Maybe he's like Superman and he's off fighting crime in Van Nuys now. He'll be back in 10 minutes.
He's all like, they're fine. They're fine.
But the point being is that, I think The Convent is really a fun movie and pretty great. I love the Gravedancers as well, but I like that this just unapologetically is your sense of humor.
Yeah, I wanted to go back to me, and because Gravedancers, it's always the funny thing because I always feel that like my movies don't get appreciated till about 3 years after they're out. It's like, oh fuck, I bombed another one, shit, and then 2 years later you find out that people actually liked it, because like no, Convent was passed around at my college and everyone watched it, and and you kind of get this kind of cult thing, but I don't know it till years later, so I was like, fuck, no one seems to be getting my weird quirky horror comedy mix. So I'm going to try to do something a little more straight, which is, the Gravedancers, which, from a commercial standpoint was successful and, was part of the 8 Films to Die For and really sold a lot of DVDs, which was great. But at the end of the day, no one really gave a shit. No one, not really passionate about it, and I'd see how passionate people would be about The Convent and my other film Killers and stuff. And so I kind of was like, fuck it. I mean, it's hard to get movies made. It's hard for anyone to give you a movie. I may never get to do another movie again. My next one, I am just going to let it fly. I'm just going to make a movie that is me, and again, the tricky thing is that it's hard for someone to give you a budget, and B, even while you're making it on set, it's hard for producers to not go like, what the fuck are you doing? Because, the thing is like, Dino Spider, it was not supposed to be a comedy. It was not supposed to be funny. It was always kind of like, no, you could have humorous elements to it. But, we want it to be suspenseful and we want it to be scary. And it's like, it's about a giant fucking spider. It's not going to be scary. Yeah. I don't care. I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe you could make a giant spider movie scary.
That's a good question.
Yeah,
I think that's actually.
Can you still do that?
Never say never.
Giant monster movies that are scary. I mean, Cloverfield works.
Rogue tried that. The guy made Wolf Creek. He did the big crocodile movie after that.
But that's still not like, like an enormous.
No, not really.
No, it's not like
and it didn't
super...
quite work either. I mean, he was trying to. Probably the approach is, yes, you make the characters the important part.
Right.
You just bring in, like Jaws. You make a film like Jaws.
Because like Blackwater was another Australian crocodile movie, and it's definitely got some scary elements to it, but it wasn't superhuman.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
yet,
exactly.
Like, if I ask my mom, some of her favorite horror movies, she always says Tarantula. And I'm like, how the fuck is that scary?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, is she an arachnophobe?
Yeah, a little bit. But
Arachnophobia was scary when it first came.
That did disturb.
Well, that's the thing is, and what I found from talking to people is small spiders very scary. People are terrified of small spiders, and I think you can certainly make a very unnerving, creepy movie about little spiders. But when you have a big ass spider or a giant spider, it's just like it's not. I don't know. You have to kind of play to your strengths, and I kind of felt that it's ridiculous. So I kind of felt that. that's sort of the problem in a lot of these movies, is that the characters treat this shit seriously. And so I felt like, well, how would you react if a giant spider? You'd be kind of like, no, what the fuck, really? And so that's kind of how we sort of played it, is that, some of the characters are, our military characters are taking this very seriously, but our leads are just like, this is the weirdest day of my life, okay? And so that was sort of the fun. And so it seemed logical to me. Plus, the script planted the seeds for everything. The script wasn't like outright hilarious, but it had humorous elements to it. And like, I feel like I caught that and then, kind of expanded upon that. And certainly by the time Greg Grunberg and the sidekick of the film, Lombardo Boyard, came on, they kept going with it, and pretty soon you couldn't stop it. Between the three of us and between it just kind of kept going funny and funnier. And so the producers, God bless them, at first understandably were kind of like, what are you doing with our money? But they'd see the dailies, they'd see the clips, and it was sort of like they couldn't really fight it anymore. They kind of got on board, going, it is more Shaun of the Dead than it is Dawn of the Dead. So
did you cast it? I noticed Ray Wise in there in one clip as well, which is great.
Yeah, no, this was sort of the background, at least my point of view on how I made the movie, is that when I was a kid, I used to gather my friends in the backyard and make monster movies, zombie movies, whatever, little Godzilla films or whatever, on our video cameras with toys and little miniatures and whatnot. And so, Gravedancers honestly kind of kicked the shit out of me. It was just a difficult movie to get made, and it didn't really, you make every movie you make, you want to hope that it gets you to another level, and it didn't. It just sort of was like, okay, well, people seem to like it fine, but it's not really doing anything. So so this was a very low budget film that came my way, and I was like, well, look, if I have the opportunity, I kind of want to go back to my roots and remember what it was like making movies when I was a kid. Kind of, I grew up very much like the movie 8mm. That when I saw that, I was like, oh man, J.J. Abrams grew up exactly like I did, because I totally get that. One generation over, because we were using VHS cameras or S-VHSs or High 8, which I wanted to jump on that conversation too. Anyway, but now technology is at such an advanced place. The things you can do with digital technology and social networking, your friend group is much wider. And so, it just kind of, we literally couldn't really afford a casting director or anything. So, it kind of came to me. It's like, look, I live in LA. I've lived here all my life. I have, a lot of friends on Facebook. I have a lot of followers on Twitter. Yeah, I'm just going to cast it within. I'm just literally, my casting session is going to be Facebook. And so with little exception, Greg Grunberg being outside of that, but he was a friend of a friend. My friend Darren Lynn Bousman was friends with Greg. And when we reached out to him, Darren was kind enough to put a good word in for me, and he came on board. But everyone else, Claire Kramer was, of course, from Gravedancers. I had done a trailer for a film that I hope to do next called Overkill, and I had Ray Wise in that. And then Lynn Shay was also a very good friend. And so I was just like, God, I have so many talented actors around me. I'm just going to pull from this. And then our extras are literally just my Facebook friends. I would literally say, hey, Sunday, September 18th, we're, be there at 8 a.m. and get killed by a giant spider. And, about 100 people would show up every time we needed these big crowd scenes. And so it was very much kind of going back to being a kid and that kind of freedom and that joy of just making movies with your friends, kind of actually, as you said, that wide-eyed feeling of, of James DeGuin of like, we're going to make movies with our friends forever.
Exactly.
And it's like, I went back to that. You know what? It was fucking great.
I still have those. Those are my shorts. Okay. I'm just like, let's just make a movie, guys. It'll be awesome.
But that's the thing, though. It's like that attitude with, whether it be the Red camera or the Arri Alexa or the 5D plus digital effects and whatnot and Final Cut, is you can take that attitude pretty far. And that was sort of my mission statement, is like, how far can we take it? I mean, this is a tiny budget movie. How far and how big of a movie can we make using let's make a movie,
What did you guys shoot on?
It didn't look cheap at all.
Red MX.
Nice.
But also a lot of 5D, all sorts of things. There's contours, there's GoPros, all sorts of stuff for, different tools. But honestly, there's major sequences, there's like car chases and stuff like that, that we shot on the 5D just because it was the most, portable camera. Mm-hmm. And the image is, it's not the same level as the Alexa or the Red, but it's a decent image. And we one of the low budget tricks that we did was shooting it all day exterior. You know, just because, you know, it's just more expensive, and, you know, you need the condors, and it's messing up your schedule and things like that. That, you know, we're like, wow, if we're clever, I don't think anyone will notice that this all took place during the day. And I don't think it jumps out at you when you watch the movie. I mean, afterwards you go, yeah, it did take place during the day. But things like that really, you know, helped us using 5Ds and stuff like that. That, you know, we didn't need to light it. It was, you know, essentially like put it on a you know, on a car and make these kind of like, you know, basically film school car chases and stuff like that. So
it's funny that it sounds like such a low budget film the way you're even talking about 5D cameras, because watching the sequence I saw, it looked more pristine in image than your previous films. Even. It just looked like a really pretty, great. Right. The opening shot where you from the clip we saw, which has that Pixies song that "Where Is My Mind" on Greg is it Grunberg?
Greg Grunberg, yeah.
His face when he gets up and he's kind of been maybe knocked out. I don't know what the context was.
Right.
I mean, it looks gorgeous. It looks just like you're watching any high-end movie. I mean,
but that's right. But again, the amazing thing about that, and that is largely a compliment to the visual effects company that we used and whatnot, is that was, you know, a Sunday morning, downtown LA street. We did get permits, although I think we probably could have gotten away without it, just because it's not that far away from like Skid Row and stuff like that. I mean, it's fairly desolate there on the weekends. And, you know, there was no, you know, and obviously people at home listening to this, they haven't seen it yet, but there's helicopters in the skies and vehicles on fire and rubble all over the street and smoke. And that's all digitally added later. It was really just Greg on an empty street with people running back and forth. And I remember our post supervisor going, he was from Pakistan, and he would go, "It looks like they are in a relay race," you know. And I'm like, "It'll be fine. There'll be buildings crumble in the background. It's gonna be great. It'll be fine." And yeah,
we'll get it in post.
We'll get it in post. But that was the thing. I mean, you really do start, because technology has come so far, even in the last 3 years of what you can do effects wise. You really start to go all kind of James Cameron crazy and start going like, no, we'll put like a dozen helicopters over there and put that car on fire and put that, you know, and you just sort of start to lose your mind and let your imagination go with it. And you know, and you really can like, yeah, let's just topple that building and let's, you know, have a jet fly by and shoot a missile or whatever, you know, and you just start kind of playing like I did when I was a kid, of like, you know, this is the building and this is, you know, and just kind of doing that, except you're doing it digitally. For those of you who
can't see, he's actually using a tissue box and a water bottle to demonstrate
that's
the
for my next
things.
film, yes. So yeah, but basically it's still that same attitude that you had as a kid, and that was really charming and wonderful and totally reinvigorated my love for filmmaking.
I wanted to talk a little bit about that opening sequence, the scene that we're talking about, because the way the movie opens is pretty much, I guess, sort of the ending, or at least in the middle of Pandemonium. It's all slow motion, and it's all cut to the Pixies' "Where Is My Mind," which is fucking awesome.
But it's not the Pixies.
A cover of it.
It's a cover of it,
It's what's her name? Something
Storm Large is the artist.
Oh, really? I used to watch a TV show that she was on, like, way back.
Oh, really?
She was on a reality show that was like Rockstar USA.
That's fine. I had no idea who that was.
She really is great voice.
I was just, you know, I wanted to find, you know, I liked, you know, the Tears for Fear song in Donnie Darko and the cover of that. And I was trying to find like just kind of a haunting song like that. And so I literally was just going through iTunes, just kind of going like, what are songs that I like? Let me find cool covers of them. And so I just went through a ton of shit. And then somehow, I'm a huge Pixies fan. And you know, I found this "Where Is My Mind" cover, which, you know, I mean, I think it had been somewhat done in Sucker Punch and whatnot as a different artist or whatever. And obviously famously used in Fight Club by the Pixies or whatnot. But it just kind of, you know, it really narrated the scene very well, as far as a guy who kind of has, you know, amnesia or whatnot, or is just kind of dazed, kind of like, you know, this haunting "Where Is My Mind" while all this mayhem goes on, you know, just seemed to work in slow motion. So that's kind of how it happened. And then, you know, again, for a low budget film, you know, we weren't sure if this happens to me if anyone is familiar with my work. It's not the first time I do a slow motion opening to a song cover, you know. But sometimes I don't get the song, you know. So my first movie, Killers, I did it to the Doors. This is the end, and at the end, you know, we couldn't, you know, the Doors were like, "Fuck you," absolutely not. And so, you know, I think the distributor just kind of slapped on "Inagata Devita," and that like kills me, because my whole thing is that it's to a certain rhythm. All the cuts are to the cuts in the music. Thankfully, in the Convent, I did it to a song called "You Don't Own Me" by Leslie Gore. And that one, there's always these little loopholes. In the 50s, they would have like alternate versions for K-Tel Records which would be these compilation records. But sometimes they'd get the original artist to do the covers. And so we couldn't get the original You Don't Own Me, but we could get the K-Tel cover, also done by Leslie Gore. And so we were able to do that. And so, and that kind of started me thinking of like, God, covers are such a better way to go, because when you're licensing a song, you have to pay for the license rights and then the artist rights for the recording side of it. But if you only have to pay one of them and either get someone to cover it or a lesser known artist, it's literally like 50% of the cost of what it is. So luckily, and again, this is when I really credit the producers, because had I been working for a smaller company that just would have had a finite budget, they would have said, "Fuck you, we're not getting you a known song for the opening. Like, this is, product. Just churn it out and do your thing." But no, they were like, "No, it's really cool. Yeah, well, all right, let's try to get the song." So they did.
Yeah. What's impressive is you actually showed me that months and months and months ago on your phone before it was even finished and before you even had the rights to the song.
Right.
And I was like, oh God, I really hope you can use this song because it looks great. But even better, a credit to a lot of the effects work that was done. I saw it without all those helicopters and stuff. You showed it to me really early, so it's really impressive how far the opening has come. And I mean, I think it sets the tone. My roommate actually came in the room while I was watching it, and he's like, "This is like the artiest, artsiest opening to a movie."
Giant spider movie.
He's like,
it's true.
He's like, for a movie called Big Ass Spider, this is like the artsiest and coolest opening you could possibly come up with.
I wanted, my whole mantra at making the movie at every step was defy expectation. You're making a giant spider movie. People are just going to assume it's asylum-level sci-fi shit. And my thing is I wanted an opening that just would make you turn your head immediately and go, I wasn't expecting that. So that was really important to me to do kind of something kind of eye-catching, and that, and again, it's part of like what I always like the cool openings. I always love the Bond openings, and I love, Raiders of the Lost Ark having the first, adventure or whatever. And so I've always been kind of enamored with the idea of having this kind of like special opening or whatever. So I wanted to kind of like, it's a chance to really kind of get to hook an audience, and also do something visually that doesn't necessarily need to apply to the rest of the movie, because then you kind of go into a more narrative thing. So I get to do a lot in those things, and I'm happy I do it, and I kind of want to continue doing that. So I'm happy you enjoy it, and that it worked for you. And I always love it when you turn people's heads and they kind of come into the room going like, what is going on? What is this? So that's
and now that nice. there are no longer any visual effects in the world because they're all on strike. We're occupied visual effects. Green screen. What about practical effects? Did you get to use anything for like makeup? I saw an amazing face melt.
Right.
That was
so
Indiana Jones. It was
fun. I mean, again, Raiders is one of my favorite movies.
If you could tie this in, the other thing I'm curious about is another audience that might come to this is the one that saw you on Monster Man.
Yes, exactly.
You did an episode of Monster Man where you talked about or tried to get practical effects going.
Yes, absolutely. I love practical effects. When I was a kid, I wanted to be a makeup artist. Rick Baker and Steve Johnson and Stan Winston, they were my heroes, and Rob Bottin. So to me, like, The Thing was the greatest thing on earth, an American Werewolf. I mean, most kids were, I was into G.I. Joe and stuff like that too, but I really I was a 7-year-old who was obsessed with that werewolf transformation.
Or The Thing where his arm's going.
Still
I
amazing.
still don't know how they do that.
I watched that and I'm just like, that's it. That's as good as it gets.
No, absolutely. It's absolutely the best. And so, it's a very hard hobby when you're, a kid. Makeup artistry is to spend your allowance on, like, I need to get new alginate and new Ultra Cal 30 and some hemp fibers so it'll set. It's a very expensive hobby, but that's where kind of like my roots were, and I used it for my student films and whatnot. So I never really, I'm one of those people that have always been kind of anti-CG to a certain degree, and anti-digital in general. I always made my movies on 35, always tried to use as much practical effects as possible. But, it's changed so much and it's come so far. You're not giving birth, are you?
No.
Okay.
No.
Right,
she's kicking, so I rubbed my belly.
She's excited about practical effects.
She's really excited about
Talk about a Serbian film. Talk about a Yugoslavian film. Quickly, somebody. Be obscure. It gets her hot. I'll get her mind off it.
Sorry. Rebecca's going to give birth any moment now, so I'm just afraid it's going to happen during this interview.
Technically, I have a week left. So
okay. All right.
Or possibly 3. We don't know.
All right.
It could
all right,
1
we'll
to 3.
See.
I hope it's next week when we have the street trash guy on.
Oh my God, that was so kick-ass.
Nice. So anyway, so I've always loved practical effects, and so approaching this movie, it's like you can't do a giant spider practically. And in fact, one of the first fights that I tried to fight was that I wanted the spider to be stop motion. I was like, that'll make it different than sci-fi stuff. Like, let's make the spider stop motion. But with the budget we had and, technologically, that's really tricky to do. I mean, that's really hard, and that would limit the amount of effect shots that we had. So part of the compromise I had was like, okay, well, the big spider, fine, it'll be digital, but, we can do a little spider and we can do a hand puppet or whatever. So we were approached by a company called Soda that were like, hey, if you do our effects, we have a reality show that we're doing for Sci-Fi Channel called Monster Man, and the production will triple your effects budget. Wow. And I was like, yeah, awesome. How about that? Cool. And so, again, that's kind of magic to a filmmaker's ears, and so from that, honestly, the one really good thing that came about that is that I was like, well, if I have to do practical effects, I never really get to see the spider really just fuck somebody up one-on-one. And again, so being a big Raiders fan and a big fan of a movie called, this is somewhat obscure, but not that obscure, The Incredible Melting Man. Yeah.
That's not that obscure.
That's not that obscure. Okay, I'm sorry. All right.
Halfwood.
Yeah, I know, totally. Anyway, so, I always love melting effects, and one of my best friends and collaborator, Joe Bishara, who's a composer, he's obsessed with the Incredible Melting Man. So I kind of wanted to give him a little bit of an homage and shout out to, like, Joe, this is for you. So that's one of the effects that we did. Now, the problem was, oh God, and how do I do this tactfully? Honestly, it's all on national television, so it's not like I'm saying anything really out of turn. The bottom line, the effects did not work out well at all. The practical effects were not what I asked for. It was I wanted a hand puppet that because we couldn't afford to do a mechanical thing.
When you say hand puppet, I literally am picturing like a black glove crawling around.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, that's not far in. What I wanted to do was to mold large spider fingers because, again, a mechanical spider, like with a radio control and all that kind of thing, to look good would at least be $50,000, and I think our budget was like 10, or something like that, if that. And so, the best kind of tool we have is puppetry, and our hands. So I thought if you could literally make finger extensions that were like spider legs that went over your hand, it could, come around corners and kind of be like, like E.T. or whatever, like grabbing the corner, like shots like that.
E.T. in spider form.
Yes, exactly. You would just see like the leg kind of crawl out or come out of a vent or whatever, come out of a bag or whatever, and that would totally work. But then they brought some rod puppet thing. I will leave it at that. And it didn't work, and it wasn't what I asked for. So unfortunately, all the practical spider effects had to go by the wayside. Oh, but wow. The digital effects, did it, and people actually, and this is the part that impresses me the most, some of the shots that they replaced, I've been asked, is like, oh, is that like a puppet that you have your hands? And it's like, no, it's all digigal. But the shot was composed for a puppet, and still it was able to translate that people still think it's a puppet. So
it was nice and subtle that before the unsubtle part where he melts, right. Actually the spider coming down in the shadow without even seeing it was just really, I don't know, it was elegantly made. I mean, that was the thing. It felt like this is a film with a lot of craft behind it. Which, I like Batman a lot, you know, that shot where it comes out, just, big bird. Where people talk outside the window to him? Or
right, exactly.
Different Batman.
Obviously, you can't predict how this is going to end up on distribution or anything like that. But right now, if people at home really want to look at it, do you have like a website or a Facebook page they can check out?
There is a Facebook page. It's a Big Ass Spider. I don't think there's a website yet. Certainly, what our main tool that we've been using is the trailer, which you can find on YouTube. Just put in Big Ass Spider. And you'll see the trailer, and that's pretty much all that's out. I think in the coming days here before our premiere at South by Southwest, we're going to start releasing a few more clips here and there. So it'll probably be about 3 clips before our premiere in 12 days.
And you're part of the midnight lineup, right?
Yeah.
And that they bring the house down because you're drinking at the Alamo.
I've never been, but I'm so relieved that there's drinking involved.
Oh, yeah.
Not only for the audience, but for me, I mean, because this is the most nerve-wracking moment of a filmmaker is kind of like, okay, I've been working on this a year and a half, now I have to fucking show it to people. And it's not like, we have test audiences or anything like that. It's like, this is really trial by fire. Like, I think this is okay. Here, what do you guys think? And
it's a fun crowd there. They're drinking and they're eating food in the dark. It's,
right.
I think that's a great place to premiere.
I am excited about it. I mean, it does sound like if it does work, that is the perfect environment for it to be at. So I'm very looking forward to it. My first time at South by Southwest. So
that's cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
it's a really fun time.
Yeah, totally. Originally, I was really, my first 2 films were at Sundance, and I kind of wanted to go back there. But I don't know. I think it's too stuffy a crowd for a big ass spider these days, you know. And South by Southwest has sort of seemed like the cooler, like, you know, you're the cool kids now.
It's the hipper one.
It's the
by
hipper
far.
one, yeah.
They chose you.
And they chose me, right?
So somebody saw something in it. So that's a good sign.
Totally. Honestly, that was been the most encouraging thing. Is, again, you know, I don't know what it is, but you know, because I can't be objective at all at this point, you know, having worked this long on it. So it was great, you know, to get a great festival like that to program it, and then we got into it to several other festivals like immediately afterwards, and it was kind of like, well, shit, somebody's digging this and thinks that their audience is going to dig it. So fingers crossed. So. And
then I guess you as a director, you, like when you said with the Gravedancers, how it didn't take you to the next level.
Right.
Now that's the role of this kind of festival, right? Is to find your way to get, what was the other film you were working on? I've seen the trailer.
Overkill. Yeah.
Overkill. And I think I saw the trailer a long time ago with like all sorts of creatures and
it
looked pretty bad.
Are you still shooting that one? Or
no, that was something, there's a producer that has it and his option's up soon. I don't know if it's going to happen or not at this point, or with him at least. So I don't know. That's something that I wanted to do, but actually the Spider movie came up first, and then that's always been like, oh yeah, we're about a month away from that going, and just independent film. You know, if any independent filmmakers out there can relate to this, you know, it's just like, you know, it's like a carrot that you're always after, and they keep pulling and pulling, and you just kind of keep going. And so I've been on, you know, chasing that carrot for like 3 years now or something like that, and I still very much want to do it. But, you know, having kind of gone through this process of like, you know, big festivals and the attention, it's kind of like, look, I want to do my weird independent movies always for the rest of my life, but if I can kind of step it up a bit, I would like to do both, you know. So I'm open to the possibilities. And again, getting to South by Southwest and seeing the reaction on YouTube and how, you know, how viral it went. I mean, that's, you know, you get chewed up through the Hollywood machinery and you get a bit jaded, but when you see positivity and such an outpour of like people going, hey, that looks cool, you know, you kind of allow yourself to kind of like, look, I'm not going to have any expectations. Let's just ride the ride and see where this goes. So
especially if you put more of yourself into this one, that's a good sign, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And so Piranha 3 Triple D calls, because, you know,
here's the thing. I think anyone who gets to make movies for a living is you know,
a lucky person.
Is a lucky person.
Yeah.
So if Piranha Triple D is, you know, my calling and that's the next movie and the best movie I can get, then I will make the best fucking Piranha Triple D that I possibly can.
That's the way to go.
But that's the thing. I mean, you know, I just want to make movies. It's the only dream I've ever had. It's the path I've been on since I was a child. You know, sometimes it really gets, you know, beaten out of you almost, where you almost want to give up, or you feel like, you know, they've given up on you and there is no coming back. So the fact that I have a new movie, it's out at South by Southwest, I'm still in the game, I've been doing this 16 years now, you know, I'm not going anywhere.
I mean, you're also an editor who works a lot, working editor. Does that help? Obviously, that helps keep you in the game, in the field. But does it also sometimes relegate you to like, oh, that guy's a great editor? But
you know, they're kind of separate. You know, I mean, and I kind of am working my way backwards in Hollywood. You know, it's like I started out as a director, but then, you know, and for a while I was able to make a living doing that. But then at some point it was kind of like, you know, I can't. You know, low budget films do not pay money and do not pay the rent, and especially if you're a selective, picky independent filmmaker that just doesn't want to do anything. You know, I kind of realized I needed another supplement, you know, another income of some sort. So I was like, what the fuck do I do? I'm a college dropout. I don't have any skills. So I'm like, well, I do, you know, I learned editing through making my movies, and so I started kind of doing like DVD documentary editing, and then like documentaries, and then movies, and now I do like reality TV shows. But, you know, honestly, it's a job. You know, it's like any of us. There's always stuff that like I don't really want to do it, but I'm happy to be employed, of course. But I am happy that it is something in the entertainment industry, and I'm happy that it does keep my brain sharp as far as storytelling. So, you know, it made me a better editor too. I edited this movie, you know, completely on my own. And you know, I don't know if I think, you know, all the TV show stuff and all the experience helped me, you know, and probably made me a better filmmaker from doing that. So
that is something interesting to point out, since we do have like a nationwide audience, is that I know that a lot of people outside of LA have this kind of idea of, you made a movie? Oh, you must be a millionaire.
Right, sure, yeah.
And that is so not the case in Hollywood.
No, absolutely not. No.
Is he not a millionaire?
Wait, I could be wrong.
Well, my
you a millionaire?
My toy collection is worth a little bit.
I have heard epic stories about your toy collection.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is my pride and joy. You know, I loved Forrest Ackerman, and I wanted to have my own Acker mansion. So I've been working on it my entire life. So you know,
Wow.
now again, when things really get hairy, you know, then I like if I have to ever sell the toy collection, that's rock bottom for me, man.
Yeah,
That's
not
when
go
things just went wrong.
Wow.
So in the meantime, you know, I continue to build on it, and
I must
and
see
love
this
it.
toy collection.
You
at some
must.
point.
You should
epic.
come over. Yes,
It's pretty
absolutely.
epic. Mike C once called it. Mike C from My Cons of Fright once called it a place where filmmaking and fandom collide.
I love
true.
that. Oh
It's
my
true.
gosh.
It is true, and I feel in good company when I see like that clip that just came out of like Guillermo del Toro's Man Cave. You know, I don't know if you saw
house.
that. His man house. I
It's a
know.
whole freaking house.
You want to talk about someone who took it to another level
Yeah.
from you know what I'm trying to do. You know, and Peter Jackson's the same way and whatnot. So you know, it started to become something beyond just my little geeky thing. And
Yeah. Did you used to be a pro wrestler too? I
yeah, a
think
little
so.
known fact. Yeah, totally.
It totally looks
No,
like it.
no, not so much. No. So.
It's
All
fun
right.
having a podcast.
Yeah.
What is a podcast? What isn't a podcast? So, are you ready for this world? I'm
Let's
gonna
do
let
it.
let's
Okay.
let Rob. I want
Worlds.
Rob to set up the incident,
Yes.
Okay.
The
And how this all
incident.
began.
Highly debated incidents.
and then we will all kind of weigh in here.
Look, all right.
what
look,
is a
let's-
horror film?
Let's just get into it has nothing to do with that, okay?
What is a horror film?
Because Chris Alexander from Fangoria like commented the most like valid argument for like what a horror movie is, and I'm like, no, but that's not the point that I'm arguing. The point I'm arguing is we monthly, you know, Rebekah and Ryan Turek at Shakti Drop host a monthly horror trivia
Where?
at Jump Cut Cafe.
What's the
Elric's
email
place.
address?
Jumpcutcafe.com. There you go. At that place. And so this is the second one, and there's all sorts of categories. And this was what was this, French Extreme?
It was to the French
French,
extreme.
yes, French
Sure.
horror.
And can I
French
just add
extreme.
one backdrop?
Which I
which
aced,
is
by the way.
I'm glad.
one backdrop I just want to mention is that the month before, Rob was on the losing FEARnet team, and he jumped ship and joined the winning team.
Nice.
Listen, I can explain that
Maybe
too.
he's just sore about losing.
No, because we were still second. So
They were second.
Fuck you both.
Okay, yeah. This could be fun.
Although I will say, there was a first and then a tie for second and third. So
There was.
So we don't know who second was. You
Yeah.
know? So I
I
don't
mean,
know
we
because I
ha-
was on the other second runner-up team.
And let me clarify, please, about the team jump.
Which was pretty extreme.
Because Lawrence.
Who leaves FEARnet?
I know, right?
Because Lawrence at FEARnet gave me a lot of shit when I told him this. What happened was the first month, it's obviously the first month that you were doing this, we wanted to support, so everybody from FEARnet went down and formed a team. Great. Second month, it didn't look like anybody else from FEARnet was going to go except for me. And I'd heard through the grapevine that Brian Collins was going to be out of town.
Uh-oh.
Oh.
So I was like, well, I'm starting a new team. And
Now,
I-
for those of you who don't know, Brian Collins is an encyclopedia of knowledge.
Yes.
And
he
he
writes
was-
for Badass Digest and a number
Yes.
of other places. He's
Yes,
written
and
for
he was
Fango. And
Horror Movie a Day, and he was also the on the winning team for the first month, which was
there was Zombie, Redneck.
Torture
Family.
Family.
There's somebody
Yes.
in Kansas listening to this. I love this podcast. It just got way too insider. It suddenly went all LA.
I know.
No.
The point being, I thought he was going to leave town, and I was like, well, I got to start a new team. So, of course, I go to Sean Keller, who was on his team last month because he's one of my good friends. I tried to get AJ. I tried to get a few other people, and nobody except Sean was in. But Sean's like, well, I'm bringing Jared because he was on my team last time. And then it turned out that Brian wasn't going away, so by default, Brian was on that team. So essentially, that whole team was still together, and I was the new member.
I don't know. It's fascinating, all the team jumps, because now everyone, because this is world-class horror trivia,
This
folks.
is, this is.
like, you think you know horror, come to the horror trivia and
gotta
see
say,
where you stack.
I'm fucking
'cause-
hardcore with my questions,
Yeah.
bitches.
Yeah.
Character names were tough.
and-
Character names.
Well,
is
that
one
was
of the
that was
toughest.
a really hard
that was
one.
ridiculously
I can
hard.
do that.
you
That was
know.
the one I felt on.
I feel you need to take it down a notch. That's just me.
Really?
Well, no,
I think we
the
need to
character
raise
name
the
was rough. I mean, because they're all movies we know. One was Near Dark, and the lead character in that is like I
had
couldn't-
no idea
I had
on that
no
one. I
idea.
even told him the only one out of that entire category, I got the Elvira, Mistress of the Dark one, and I got
Yes.
the Reggie from I can't even remember the
Wasn't
name now.
Phantasm,
I
because that would be
think
easy.
Wasn't
that we are being
Phantasm.
too specific
No,
right
absolutely. Yes, totally. No, we should broaden it out.
No one
but
knows
the
what
point
we're
is,
talking
my
about.
point is of saying that this is hardcore shit, man. This is the hardest chord of nerd horror.
Yes,
all battling for a T-shirt and a pillow.
Exactly. And Mike was on one of the other teams, which is why I wanted him in on this debate. But anyway, to get to the thick of it, one of the answers to one of the questions in the category of French extreme horror turned out to be the movie
Time destroys everything.
Yeah,
Not
my
that
question
one.
was actually.
No, that was the tagline.
Yeah,
Time
my
destroys
question
everything.
was, what French movie has the phrase "time destroys everything" repeated throughout?
That's the tagline for the movie, the poster.
They use it as a billboard, and then one of the characters actually says it in the film. So
The answer is Gaspar Noé's Irreversible.
Mm-hmm. Which I
Now-
got correct because I love that film, and I mean, love is a hard, not quite the right
you can't
word.
really
but
love that.
I
You
appreciate the movie.
it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gaspar Noé is a one-shot deal for me. I will see all his movies at least once, and then I never want to see them again.
Yeah, I
it
think
doesn't
that's
mean
about
I
right.
don't,
No,
I
I
don't
think that's
like
right.
them. It's
Yeah.
just that they're great, but
And
I
then
just
they're literally
too
in
much.
one shot.
They're more
So
like
it's-
experiential, like Enter the Void. You experience the film.
Right.
Would you watch it again? Probably not.
That's
see
how
it
I
on
am
screen.
about the majority of the French extreme, though. Like when it comes to like Martyrs or Fat Girl or any of the ones like that, like I will watch it once. I will say, okay, that totally affected me. I'm not going to forget it, but
Right.
I don't need to own it.
Partly because
sure.
they're not made for fun.
Yeah.
They're not
Totally.
there to entertain. They're there to show you something. But okay, so
I
let's
mean,
get to the.
one person and actually somewhat relates to. Well, okay. Well, I was going to say. Well, all right. I was going to say the other person that kind of reminds me is not a French filmmaker, but Simon Rumley makes films that, are very intense and you feel awful. But it's not something that's upon like you don't gather your friends together and it's like let's smoke a bowl and watch fucking Red, White, and Blue,
yeah.
man.
I wrote that one down. I'm so glad that you brought that up. It's at the top of
because
page 3
all right,
of
sorry,
my
To the
notes.
I'm getting ahead of
controversy.
myself because you're going to get jumped on, Rob G.
I know. Apparently by everybody, and that's fine. You can bring it. My argument is, personally, I don't think Irreversible is a horror movie. A horror movie by traditional standards of what a horror movie is. Now, you can argue that there's horrible things in it, and I understand that because nobody wants to see Monica Bellucci raped for 15 minutes or whatever. It is awful, and it's
Anally raped.
Well, sure.
By the tapeworm.
by the
Sure.
tapeworm.
And I mean, it does have one of the best on-screen deaths.
Murders,
that I've ever
absolutely.
murders
It has dread,
ever.
tension.
Right.
Okay, but the point being this. If you have to debate it, if you're not 100% sure, if you ask the average horror fan, is this a horror movie or not? And they're like, well, I'm not sure. I think it is. I don't think that it should be the answer to a horror movie trivia question.
But
Why-
it's in the elite.
Why is Last House on the Left exempt? Why is I mean that
I never
to me,
brought up Last House.
But
on
it's
the
a
Left.
But
Wes,
everyone
it's a
accepts it
Wes
as a horror
Craven
film.
movie, and we all accept it as a horror movie, and it's the same type of stuff. You know, it's
And I wrote
it's
down
murder
for
and
me
rape and,
Deliverance, and I think I actually wrote down Last House on the Left. How is it different from Deliverance? It's not effective, except that one's a better made film. One happens to have been made by a guy who went on to build a career in the genre.
Right.
But had we just taken it on its own, or Virgin Spring for that matter, which is
Sure.
Last House on the Left. But the point is, Deliverance and Last House on the Left have everything in common.
Totally.
Except no one really calls Deliverance a horror film. I do. I wouldn't put it in the
No,
video store in a
I
horror.
could see it because
but it has horrific elements that scare me and made me feel things.
I think where people go with the argument is that they go like, oh, so Straw Dogs is a horror movie, and that one's on the fence, debatable, you know, because it's well, it's an intruder movie, you know, and
Home
so,
invasion, yeah.
it's a home invasion movie. So I would say that one is a bigger stretch. But Irreversible, I mean, A is horrifying, B really affects you, C is something that you don't want happen. D, features one of the most graphic murders that was emulated in tons of horror movies following it. And it reminded me of another movie that was also on the trivia question, a movie that I find to be the scariest film of all, or one of the scariest movies for me, a movie called Calvaire, which is about a town that wants to make a guy their man bitch. And the town is chasing him to rape him. And so I don't know, like sometimes, death isn't the worst thing. And so like, the idea of being a town raping you, I don't know, I'm sure as terrifying as a woman as it is for a guy, I would think.
But also, it also ends up being talking a bit about definition of the genre, and that is definitely something that we can't figure out
Well,
because it's such an open.
For me,
Well, Aristotle said no. I'm
no,
sorry.
no, I'm not getting into my Aristotle yet.
Before you get to that Aristotle nonsense, just but Last House on Left to you is a horror movie.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
count
I
it as
think
a
it
horror
is.
film. Yeah.
So, I mean, you just made a very valid point. I consider Last House on Left a horror movie because of the exploitation elements of it and the multiple murders, but I don't think Virgin Spring is a horror movie, and it's the same movie, technically. It's
Yeah,
a
but
remake
it
of
doesn't
that
push it
movie.
as far. Yeah, you agree. It's the same movie structurally, but it doesn't push those elements to where it becomes a horror
To
film.
me, it's Virgin Spring has...
It's all off camera. It's all
yeah, but
withheld.
Virgin Spring is from a filmmaker that has a certain sense of artistic merit, whereas Last House on Left is
It's a
pure
mess.
fucking exploitation.
Right.
I think Irreversible is somewhat. As horrible as the things in it. It's a modern version of that artistic expression.
Oh, it's totally an artistic
It's
movie.
not what
for
I
sure.
would-
Absolutely.
But I don't put it in the same class as Last House on Left, even though they're both equally as upsetting.
Now, see, that's where I have problems. I think that, for starters, genre for me is purely a marketing term. And I had this conversation with Elric yesterday where I was talking about, like, if we look at William Friedkin's Bug, that thing was marketed like fuck as a horror film. Clearly not a horror film. But these terms get applied to just, how are we going to market this film? But when it comes to like genre as a fan, we use it to define ourselves. Like all four of us sitting in this room, I think if, we said, what industry do we work in? Oh, we work in horror.
Right.
But I think it's a very permeable term that,
and
a
it
lot
should
of
be.
things.
And I think that's the biggest issue I had with this wasn't so much whether you were right or we were right, was that I felt like what Cabin in the Woods was about wasn't just the Cabin in the Woods movies. I think a lot of people go, that's going to be the end of that cycle. Oh, that was clever. No, I think they're making a broader statement about going back to the same old trough and that we lack originality. And if what we consider a genre film is just this generic formula, then they're going to get old and they're going to get boring. Whereas if we expand it to be like things that actually unnerve us, I mean, I look back at things like Exorcist, Rosemary Baby, all these movies, and Deliverance, in a way, have reality at the core.
Right.
And about real people. Take out the horror elements, the supernatural elements, and it would almost hold up as a dramatic movie. Whereas
Sure.
most horror films that are being made now aren't. They fall into tropes, character types.
Completely.
And what's nice about something like Irreversible, it definitely has that in common with those movies.
Well,
It still falls into tropes. That's
Which
how I would say. Well, this is where I'm the only time I will bring up Aristotle. So when
Oh,
we're
shit.
talking, I told you guys. So since we're talking about genre, I went back and read Aristotle's Poetics because I'm a big book nerd, and since he was the one who originally kind of founded the genre theories. And he said that genre boils down to three things: medium, objects, which is kind of, I'm writing poetry and, I'm playing a flute. And then the third one is imitation that defines genre. For me, Irreversible is a rape revenge film.
Yeah. All cut up, told in a
Done
different
backwards.
sequence.
Completely.
Yeah,
Done
exactly.
backwards, but it's still a rape revenge film.
And one of the questions I usually get, as a filmmaker is what scares you, right? And it's a very common question you get. And the God's honest truth is like, it's not zombies, it's not vampires, it's not, axe murders, anything like that, because that's all, or werewolves, because that's all stuff of fiction, right? So what scares me is real life and reality. So what I always say is like, the stuff that really gets under my skin, A, Irreversible is one of them, B, Red, White, and Blue is another one that fits in that category. And there's an episode of 6 Feet Under where, Dexter, gets carjacked. And he gets, it's half the episode, and it's just a straight thing where some guy like forces a gun on him, makes him drive, makes him smoke crack, pours gasoline on him. And it was the most horrifying half hour of my life. Or just one of the most things that really affected me and really got under my skin.
That was 6 Feet Under, right?
Right, 6 Feet
I
Under,
remember that was an amazing episode.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that to me was terrifying, but is it genre-y?
Well, also, as we get older, and especially those of us in horror, right, what scares us probably changes a lot.
Sure.
And it becomes much more the real-life stuff that if you have a kid or if you have a wife or somebody you need. I remember being one of the most scared I ever was taking a girlfriend when I was young to Italy and just watching these packs of men follow us on the street. And,
Right.
And of course, it was probably harmless, and it was in this situation, but
things could go bad.
I'd seen Stro Dogs.
Right.
Yeah.
And I was terrified that I wouldn't know what to do.
Right,
I would have
totally.
no control over the situation, and that literally terrified me. I mean, that's coming from, it's not coming from a supernatural, but as kids,
Right.
those things are more put into monsters and put,
Right,
those
totally.
same fears.
And so that's the thing is like, as we kind of grow older and we've, grow up on so many zombie movies and so not, like the stuff that really scares me is the more realistic reality based stuff. And so Irreversible to me, like, plays on the more realistic side, which that's what really kind of terrifies me. So if it effectively scares you and effectively unnerves you, I don't know, then to me it's kind of a genre movie.
But
although, you know,
I will play devil's advocate here with Rob for a sec and say, when
Really?
Wait, you can't do that.
I know I can't.
You
I
can't
can't
quote Aristotle to defeat him.
Well,
and
in a
then go,
sec, I'm going to quote Freud, but I'm
Oh my
getting
God.
there.
I see that you're relinquishing the pretentious crown that usually Elric
Yeah,
wears,
yeah.
and we're going to get over to Rebekah for the week.
I wrote down Wikipedia, so I'm all like ghetto and gangster.
This is my PhD in film theory coming out. But when it comes, like when I look up Irreversible on IMDb, it says that it's a mystery thriller. So then that got me saying, well, okay, if this is a mystery thriller, what else is? So then I went through like a whole lexicon of films that I think are probably similar. Red, White, and Blue is listed as a dramatic thriller. Old Boy, I Saw the Devil, Lady Vengeance, all listed as mystery thrillers. So, I mean, these
Somebody
ones,
at this table made a big documentary on a film called Psycho.
Yeah.
The director of which calls the film suspense.
Yeah.
Not
Exactly.
horror. Even though I agree, I think it's a horror film by our modern definition of what we. What do you think?
Well, no, obviously, but I think the reason it was referred to as suspense is because
He didn't want to
they,
get away.
they had never, that wasn't an element, maybe there was, but that was the first horror movie of its type. You know what I mean? Like that defined that style,
Yeah,
that
it created its
subgenre
own
of horror.
subgenre.
So horror in that way didn't exist.
I also wonder if horror
that
was a
point.
real dirty word right then
I'm
for
sure
a
it
big
was.
studio. It still is in a way, but
Right. No,
but
for
it's made
sure
a lot
it
more
was,
money
for sure.
since.
I mean, you know, he
Yeah.
was the master of suspense.
Yeah.
So there's no way that he would, you know, degrade himself by, you know, being a horror movie, I'm sure.
Yeah.
So
But
Well,
I
and
mean,
I mean-
but today he'd be one of the masters of
he'd be a
horror.
master
yeah,
of horror.
totally.
Completely.
And
Well,
he'd
I
eat all
mean,
the food at their dinners.
From like the dawn of film through like the 1940s, there were really only two genres. You were either making comedies or melodramas. And then when horror emerged in the 40s, like the big thing that, decreed this is a horror film was that it had supernatural elements. So, I mean, especially when you're seeing like the rise of the Universal monsters, they had to have a supernatural element. Oh, the moon turns me into a wolf, or, crazy creature
Or
lives
science,
here.
or crazy
yeah,
science.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
crazy
crazy
bugs.
science,
Yeah.
exactly.
Giant bugs, exactly.
So
things
the
like that.
idea of having like a real life, killer was pretty new. And I think that that's probably why he called it suspense film, because it wasn't horror at the time. It wasn't as they saw horror because it didn't have, a supernatural element to it.
I can't not quote the Wikipedia because I think they got it completely right. I only took the first two lines, I swear.
Okay.
Film genre seeking to elicit a negative emotional reaction from viewers by playing on their primal fears. To me, that's a beautifully kind of broad. The only bad part is the negative emotional reaction, because there are horror films that could be positive or.
Absolutely.
But I
Evil
like
Dead too.
I like
Yeah.
the openness of that from Wikipedia.
but
You
I
probably
mean-
wrote that on Wikipedia.
No,
before.
I did
That
not.
I have a hard time with, because a western's a genre. So that's specific
this
to
was-
the horror genre.
No, this was horror. No,
horror.
this
Oh,
was
okay,
horror.
okay.
Sorry,
All right, well, that
it
makes
said
sense.
a film genre.
Okay.
Seeking to elicit negative.
Well,
All right,
look,
fair
the
enough.
thing is this. I mean, I worked at a video store for several years, and I'm always thinking in terms of, where do I file this?
Yeah, totally. I think
have
our
a
whole
complete-
generation is,
and
not
that's
just
the
video
thing.
stuff. but-
Irreversible is filed in, obviously it's in
Art house,
foreign first,
foreign.
Right, sure.
and then it goes in cult if we have an extra
Really?
copy.
Cult?
That's pretty much all of Gas. Enter the Void is definitely cult.
But
Or
video stores are very broad definitions. Where do you put Silence of the Lambs?
mystery thriller. Although I think it's a horror movie as
Right,
well.
exactly.
But yeah, I mean, mystery thriller is definitely more in line with horror, and I always argue those all the time, especially the Hannibal Lecter movies. But the point is, I'm so used to thinking in those terms of separate genres. So when I'm getting asked, when I know that it's like, all right, here's a horror question.
But you did know it was French, so that did help a little.
Yes.
Yeah,
then
French
my-
Extreme. That
then
should
my
narrow it down to
mind-
about 20 films.
Yeah, well, my mind was not thinking of things that I would file in, cult or.
But I think that's the cool
French,
thing about
but-
it being, and I think it's your ideas are totally valid for you. I think what's cool about this conversation is it's like horror is this personal genre where we define it for ourselves. 'Cause what
Completely.
unnerves me doesn't necessarily unnerve you, and your crazy Yugoslavian butterfly movie didn't scare me at all.
Oh, fuck you with things scary shit. No, the one that I was actually shocked that nobody called me on was I asked a question, like 3 questions before the one on Irreversible. I asked one on Chien Andalou. which is that crazy pretentious art film by Buñuel and
Salvador Dali.
Called groundbreaking.
But you had an eyeball being sliced by a razor blade, and that was, you know,
a cow's eye.
In Irreversible, you beat a guy's face in with a fire extinguisher.
No, I'm saying that's why I didn't have an argument with it.
Okay.
I was pro it being there, even though it's an art film, you know, because there's, you know, I mean, it's pretty avant-garde arty as it gets, you know. So
that whole round on French films, man.
I got 9 out of 10. I got 9 out of 10.
You wait till Bollywood horror.
I was fine. I was like, oh, she's busted out Calvaire.
Listen, what this comes down to is I'm just mad that I didn't win a VHS copy of VHS.
Right? No, I know, and
I'll see if I can get you another one.
And I was very upset I didn't get the Jason hockey mask pillow.
I'm gonna give you mine. You've heard me on that network because I no longer use my VHS.
There you go.
It's yours.
You heard it first.
We're gonna make him feel better.
But who got?
But Rob, I totally understand why you would say that it isn't a horror film, because if I was going by like what I think my actual written definition of horror film is, I probably wouldn't put it in either. But at the same time, when I'm like in my Fango brain, Old Boy's a horror film. Let me write on.
But you also said like FEARnet reviewed it.
Well, I actually went through Bloody Disgusting, gave it 4 out of 5 skulls. Fango gave it 4 out of 4 skulls. Joe Blow, Error in the Head, Chud.com. But I will say also in your defense, on Chud.com, under the review of it, there's a debate about whether or not it's a horror film.
Wow.
And why is Martyrs just immediately accepted? Like
Martyrs, there is like a ghost thing in it. I mean, there's more. It's. I mean, there's a lot.
It's got some otherworldly elements.
Right. And also, I think we put extreme cinema. I mean, well, no, they're similar in that, but the extreme without the skin is kind of getting to kind of practical effects and gore. You know, Irreversible does it all within the real world still. So.
Plus, one of our people who works on Blood and Guts, the show that we make for Fangoria with me, Jack Bennett, says that a horror film is any time that the violence is glorified, and he says that that's why Martyrs works. I don't really know if the violence is glorified because it's so repulsive.
It's not glorified at all. I think,
but it's over the top.
No, but it's extreme, and it's that's frightening. Martyrs is the violence, and it's frightening.
That's another one of those films that I watched once, and then
I couldn't watch it
I don't
again.
need to see it ever again.
Especially the last 30 minutes, I just was like, whoa.
You know, can I say something? I haven't. It took me a really long time to build up the courage to watch the movie because I've heard so much about it. I'm like, I don't know if I can handle Martyrs. You know,
really?
Just judging from what I heard about it, because I just don't like unpleasant things. I finally watched it. I think I actually watched it after Serbian film because I was like, well, if I can handle that, I can handle anything. And I was kind of with it for the first hour because it was just a really extreme revenge movie.
And it was a cool mystery of like, what the fuck happened to these girls?
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
I was cool with it. But that last 20, 30 minutes is some of the most pretentious bullshit ever put in a movie.
What, her getting beat up? Or
yeah, I mean...
it's them trying to talk to God, right, through her...
I thought that was great.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I thought that was really interesting.
There's our spoiler. The whole... I mean, I just don't need this, 30 minutes of beating the shit out of a girl that you actually kind of like and feel bad for because she doesn't know if her best friend's crazy. She just knows she's in love with her and wants to help her get revenge.
Right.
And then you beat the shit out of this girl for 30 minutes, and the whole reasoning behind it was like just a bunch of rich fucking... idiots who are like, we just want to know what happens after death. Yeah. Or whatever it was.
I don't know.
It's a pretty good reason to beat the shit out of someone.
I found it interesting. I don't know. I mean, that was kind of... It's different, you know.
Sorry if I ruined Martyrs for you, but it sucks.
You don't like Martyrs, really? Like, you actually...
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever
I'm
watch
starting
it.
to see a bigger pattern develop about French art house horror.
I'm
starting to see.
I kind of like Inside, but
like Inside.
Inside until it does the zombie thing at the end. I love the first 3 quarters of that. I love, and as soon as they have the kind of zombie cop, it's like what?
I'm gonna say nothing on that one because that I don't know. I don't know about that one.
You didn't like Inside?
It just doesn't play by its own rules. It's just sometimes it's Peter Jackson, sometimes it's realistic horror, sometimes it's
and it showed in their follow-up. Their follow-up didn't work at all. Livid didn't make it look sense.
And so I admittedly I think it's a great concept, and I think there are creepy moments, but I sort of want a movie to kind of set its world and stick to it. And I just think it's all over the place. Like, we're Peter Jackson, we're this, we're that, and it's just kind of like...
It could also be when you have 2 directors, too, sometimes.
It could very well be.
Things kind of pull it to him.
It very well be. And so that was my thing, and I just felt that the characters would make really stupid choices, and just strange things were happening. I don't know. For me, I'm like, okay, I just guess I'll let it go because it's French, and
But I'm sad those guys didn't get to make a
Hellraiser.
sequel to Rob Zombie's Halloween. They were for Halloween 2 for a while.
They were trying.
Weren't
for
they doing
that?
Hellraiser too?
Wow.
No, yeah, they were attached to Halloween 2 and then Hellraiser.
The Martyrs guys would have made sense for Hellraiser at the time. Martyr director would have made.
But no, the Inside guys were supposed to do Halloween 2, which would have been just batshit crazy.
I don't know, but I do love the scene in Inside where she's at the window and just kind of comes out, and that's a very creepy image and a
And the
very cool
arm
thing.
through the thing being cut was
Yeah.
very
No, I
fun
mean,
there.
there's great stuff in it, and again, and I'm sure you can relate to it more than ever. I mean, is there anything more terrifying than someone trying to get your child? I mean,
It's a little, I have to say, like, people have come at me and been like, is this not the most terrifying film that you've ever seen now?
Right.
No, I've seen pregnancy films right now that are far more terrifying than that. Baby's blood is pretty fucked up.
Okay.
So, I mean, Inside didn't affect me nearly as bad as some of the other French films I've seen. Like, has anybody seen Catherine Breillat's Fat Girl was one that just, like, I was gone for days for that one.
I don't know that one.
See, that
actually.
one, that's the one where I would go on the other side and say it's not a horror film, but I would say it's
not a horror film.
a coming of age, sexual film with these kind of dark fantasies. But it's powerful.
That's the one that I was gone for days. On, that
Criterion
one.
put that one out?
Yeah.
Is that yeah.
It's intense.
It's a hard
really
watch,
intense.
but it's beautiful. Did you see that? What's the Rubber? The crazy film with the tire that?
Yeah.
I love
It's got the girl from that.
That's
you know what?
interesting, yeah.
I've tried twice to watch the movie, and I'm out after like a half hour. I'm like,
The first 5 minutes are great.
And we can edit this out if we meander too long. But Red, White, and Blue, where is that on? For you?
I loved Red, White, and Blue. It was my #1 film of 2011, whenever it came out. And Amanda Fuller's a close friend of mine, so I think that she just did an absolutely fucking amazing job in that. And yeah, that was one of those films that I absolutely love, where I don't even know if I would call it a horror film, but we covered the shit out of it on Fango.
I wouldn't necessarily call it a horror movie, but you hear Simon Rumley talk about it. I saw a Q&A afterwards, and he was like, I actually wanted to make a slasher movie with this, and I just thought of what's a different way someone could go around killing people. And it was like, holy shit, if you look at it, it actually kind of is. It's
And using
kind
a
of
modern fear.
Yeah, exactly.
It's even smarter.
So I don't want to spoil it for
It's
anyone.
it's an unnerving film.
Oh, God, it's brutal.
it's
That's
extreme.
one of those ones you see once, and it's like, you see that again. But
My
yeah.
husband was
But I
watching it on a
appreciated it.
plane, and I made him stop. I was like, before he gets to the 3-way stop. Now,
Right.
you can't watch this on the plane.
Sure.
Yeah, it's extreme. But I mean, yeah. So I guess I don't know if we've really.
I think, yeah, I'm satisfied with this debate.
Yeah.
I have to ask, what was the one question from French Extreme that you got incorrect?
I don't remember.
Was it the base moi?
No, we got
That
that.
was, yeah, that one was
basement.
easy.
Okay.
We got that.
That was
Which that one I would actually say is probably not a horror movie.
That one,
But
I
she
don't
threw
know.
up. She threw up on his dick, and that kind of was pretty.
That's
horrific.
pretty intense.
So
I don't know. That's like a killer spree. That's like, would you consider Natural Born Killers to be a horror movie, or Bunny Game, or things like that? So
It's slippery. Yeah, it's a funny
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
And because cult exploitation doesn't have its own things. Oh, cult
Yeah.
does, but exploitation doesn't always have. And that's a broad. Look at most horror magazines report on all these films.
I do
Yeah.
kind of
And
think
that's-
when people are getting murdered and there's more than one murder, it kind of I mean, and obviously that's a whole stuff because action movies could then be considered. Well, actually, we didn't get into The Raid, which actually hold on, one thought there, because that was also a gripe about it being a horror movie, and I agree it's not. But if you listen to the commentary and really see the structure of it, it's a John Carpenter movie. It's hugely influenced by Assault on Precinct 13. And he says that besides obviously action movies, that his #1 influence is John Carpenter.
But then John Carpenter's #1 influence is Western.
Right.
So Assault on Precinct is a Western, and
actually,
it's not a horror film.
I would say Assault on Precinct 13 definitely has George Romero overtones.
It might, but it's,
With the
it's
horde,
definitely a Western.
It's very zombie for me,
Right.
with the horde entering.
But so that's the thing is, like, even though like The Raid doesn't, and I certainly wouldn't have thought of it a horror movie when I watched it. I just thought it was an ass-kicking action movie. When you listen to the way he's thinking about it and look at some of the shots of like guys holding machetes and scraping the thing, he's like, no, horror movies were a huge influence on this movie. So and after hearing him say it and watching it, it's like, yeah, no, I totally see it.
And then you'll see S-VHS and be like, yep.
Oh, clearly.
Could be the next best horror director.
Yeah, no. Oh, that guy's so talented. I'm
Yeah.
so excited to see
Yeah.
anything he does,
So
And he's
genre.
Welsh.
Yeah.
All
A Welsh guy making films in Indonesia.
Who lives in Indonesia? How about that?
Who knows?
So
So that's good. So we're not going to cut straight out. We're going to do a 2-minute wrap on
some
news
quick
and then go
news,
out.
because some cool things happened this week. We actually got some really cool stuff this week. Kathy Bates joined American Horror Story season 3, which I am
Stoked about
super
that.
psyched about. Like, perfect casting. So we had that. Last Exorcism and Stoker open this weekend. Are you guys going to see either?
if I have time, yeah, I'm dying to see Stoker. I've heard nothing but raves about him.
Yeah, I want to see Stoker.
Yeah, I love Chandler Park. I definitely want to see Stoker. Last Exorcism, I don't care.
No,
but
that I don't care
I will
about.
say this: I did post something on FEARnet a few days ago, which you can look up. Is they did a viral video where they had some girl dressed up like the possessed girl at a beauty parlor.
I was so confused by that video.
I don't know why. I don't know why
she was just hanging out there.
She's hanging out behind a mirror. It's hilarious. Just check on.
Well, they seem to do, and I don't know exactly who's the thinking, what the thought tank behind this stuff is, but like, there's all these crazy viral videos for horror movies. Like Final Destination 5 had that like crazy music video that was based on Saved by the Bell. Have you ever seen that?
That I didn't know.
I did not see that.
No.
It's got all the lead characters from from Final Destination 5 playing characters from Saved by the Bell, and it's all like, this poppy love song, but then they all slip and get murdered, Final Destination style. And it was because one of the lead actors in the movie also is a like a singer, and so they made a music video of it, but they tied it into Final Destination because the entire cast, and they kill everyone. But at the same time, it's like, what the fuck am I watching? Like, what the hell is it? It's actually pretty good, wow. But again, it's just weird viral videos that I just don't know. Like, there's some marketing team out there like, we got to think outside the box.
They actually did one, and I think it was actually for the first Last Exorcism movie. I could be wrong on this, so don't quote me. But it was one of the exorcism movies that came out about 4 to 5 years ago. And they did videos on chat roulette where they would actually have this girl talking to people on chat roulette. She would look like she was about to take her top off, and then she would morph into a demon.
Oh, yeah.
And they recorded the people reacting to her. Like, it was all guys who were like, oh, dude, she's going to take her top off. And then they'd get freaked out.
And then,
totally.
And then it's just a close-up on some guy's penis because it's chat roulette.
Yeah, but I mean, it's really funny. It's just they hide this girl that looks like a dead possessed girl behind the mirror at a beauty salon. So people sit down and they're getting their hair cut, and she just keeps flashing. And they're like, "What the hell is that?" Like,
so people freak out, right? It's like a scare tactics kind of thing.
Yeah, they freak out, and then at the end of the video, I guess she's a gymnast because she does the poster thing.
Right. I actually thought she was the girl from the poster because it looked very much like her. It could be.
They had her crawl out on all fours backwards like that into the middle of the place, and everybody just starts freaking out.
Everyone just goes, "Oh no, you didn't."
It sounds like it was inspired by that clip that was really viral and crazy about the elevator in Japan.
That's gotta be it.
Yeah, and
that was a few weeks ago.
Right, totally.
I haven't seen this clip. What is it?
It's like a Japanese reality show or something like that, or it's like a candid camera type thing. And so there's an elevator that people ride in, and then like lightning starts going off, and there's a hidden compartment, and then all of a sudden like a little Samara ring girl like shows up in the elevator,
and it's standing right next to them.
It's right next to them, and then they like the lights come back on. Yeah, they freak out or whatever. So and it just seemed like, from what you're describing, I didn't see the last Exorcism one, but it seemed like the same type of idea.
That was a viral video a few weeks ago, and I feel like that's totally the inspiration for this.
Yeah,
that's
definitely.
awesome.
I'll forward it to both of you guys.
That's funny. I watched it today. It was good on your site.
I'm going to be seeing Last Exorcism on Monday night. I'm actually taking my mom. So I'm kind of excited about that.
Perfect pregnancy movie.
I think so. And a perfect mother-daughter movie, too.
The thing I only saw just before we got here was the Conjuring trailer, which
I didn't get to see. So you guys have to tell me about it.
Well,
excellent.
I was excited purely because in our first episode, we talked about how and you did that great article about trailers that use stuff not from the film.
Yeah.
This does something that trailers should always do and never do. That instead of flashing you through the whole movie, this doesn't even show you half the characters who are going to appear. It just sticks with one person. But what it does is it sets
That's a weird tactic.
It sets up tone so well, and it sets up suspense. And it made me want to see the shit out of this movie.
Yeah.
I've seen the movie.
Oh, you've seen the movie?
Mike Mendez has seen it.
I have, and it is excellent.
Okay.
Really?
I think it's James's best film.
Oh, okay, that's exciting.
Excellent.
That's exciting. But, because we know there's all these other people in the film, and we know that there's these stars in the film, and we know that it's all somewhat about the true ghost hunters. Or whatever you would call them.
Yeah, no.
But it's great that you don't even show them in the trailer.
No, that's right.
Yeah. It's this great. Rebecca, you can watch it later, but it's like this great. Yeah, it's pretty much a setup between a hide and seek game between the mother and her kids, and then involves this thing with what could be a ghost and the clapping, which is really scary and creepy. But what's great is I actually know somebody that read for the movie. And told me, watch the trailer. I was like, you know what? That clapping thing is not in the script at all.
Oh, I'm sure it wasn't. Yeah,
but it's interesting because it's it seems, I don't know if it's a happy accident or just a credit to James's skill set, but it's just one of those things that immediately seems iconic. Because immediately I saw Twitter hashtags hashtag clap clap.
Right.
So it's going to be that thing.
He is gifted at setting up scares, and I mean that's his thing. I mean that's what and obviously I'm excited to see him move beyond the genre and whatnot. But he's just excellent at setting up those scares, the setup, and knowing when to get it. And I think the movie tested through the roof when they were doing the test screenings of it. And I think
Didn't they bump it up? It wasn't supposed to be till fall, and they moved it to summer.
Well, it was going to be. It was actually going to come out the week after Texas Chainsaw, the 3D one, and they pushed it because
back.
They pushed it to the Dark Knight slot. That it had July 19th.
Okay.
So it's that nerve-wracking thing is like, how does horror do in the summer? Usually not well, but they just have that much confidence in the movie. But it is really good.
That teaser was really
well. That's the tone of the movie. That is
really impressive.
Yeah,
it's just a 2-minute scene
with a real actress, right? Somebody who actually is a great actor.
Yeah, Lily Taylor. Yeah,
and you're kind of like that's all you need to know. You don't need to know the whole plot. You just watch this one scene out of context. It's almost like watching a short, and you're like, that was a kick-ass short. I wish that was a whole movie.
No,
I wish that would become how trailers are, because it's just, I'm so sick of seeing the film flash before my eyes.
Yeah. And again, the good thing is that I think it's very representative of the movie. It's like if you like that tone and you were creeped out, you're gonna have a good time.
Can't wait to see it.
Exciting.
So the last thing I have news-wise this week that I was kind of excited about is that it was announced that Niels Arden Oplev, who did the original Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, is going to be doing the Redux of Flatliners.
Yeah, I heard that.
I mean, that would be cool only if William Baldwin reprises his role.
That's funny. I was saying the exact same thing.
As the womanizer.
He's like, I'm still fucking lots of chicks.
I want Kiefer Sutherland still as like the hardened goth kid.
But now he'd be in a way more of a hurry.
And I was going to say Kevin Bacon, so I think what we want is a sequel where everyone comes back
30 years later.
Exactly. Julia Roberts, she can stay. We don't need her, but
she's flatlined. We're cutting her out.
Who was the guy who played Steckler in the first one? Steckle?
Oliver Platt?
That's it, Oliver Platt. Okay.
Yeah. No,
actually, I kind of do want to see all of these guys. That's a great cast.
That's a great cast. Yeah, totally. So
it's a fun film, but I wonder if they'll go with that crazy green aesthetic. You know how everything's tinted?
I think it's actually one of Schumacher's most interesting films.
Definitely.
So I definitely dig
fascinating.
that. And Batman and Robin. No, I'm kidding.
All threes is coming.
Joke. Not true.
Well, I'm anxious to see what he does with it. So, yeah.
I'm anxious to see Big Ass Spider.
Yeah.
South by Southwest.
All right.
Wow.
Thanks for joining us. This has been fun. You should come even when you don't have a big ass spider coming out.
Look, I will bullshit nerd stuff all the time. Okay, so it's what I do on the phone anyway. So so this is fine.
Rob had a thought.
I did have a thought. Well, let us know how South by Southwest goes and when we could see the film in Los Angeles and the rest of the country.
Right.
But if you're around this Sunday, we're going to be screening Street Trash. It's a Killer POV sponsored event at the Jump Cut Cafe in Los Angeles.
With writer producer Roy Frumps in person. And the reason that's cool for people in LA is he is just completely a New York guy. He has been the teacher of a lot of people, including Ryan Turek and a few others at the School of Visual Arts. And so it's rare that we'd get him out here. So we're excited. And I know Becca's a huge fan of the film. So
I am diehard on that.
On my calendar. So I intend to be
He's going to be joining us on the show next week as well.
Yes, he will be our guest here next week for those who don't get to be there.
Come watch Street Trash with us, and then we'll have Roy on the show next week. It'll be fun.
Yeah.
It'll be exciting.
It'll be a good time.
Cool. Thanks, Mike, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You have just been listening to Killer POV.
Sweet.